course, as glaciers move, they grind, they destroy everything, but in turn, they open everything up for life again. You're just part of this experience of destruction and creation all happening right before your eyes.
Glacier Bay holds this majestic scale of vastness that I have found in few other places on Earth.
The definition of wilderness, basically from the Wilderness Act of 1964, it talks about it's a place where humans come and they don't remain. And so humans aren't influencing a lot of people to come here. It's nature itself.
When you come here, you can kind of discover why these places are important and why it's worth protecting these places and why we need places like this more and more. They do feed our soul. They give us a chance to connect into some more real time and real things. This is as real as it gets.
So our day starts pretty normal. You wake up, you go to work, but instead of commuting with a car to our office, we commute by a boat to get onto your ship. So we take a little pilot boat and we see our ship coming and it's looming in the distance and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we end up coming up behind it and we climb up a rope ladder that's dropped down through a hatch.
Glacier Bay is special for a lot of reasons. One thing is the incredible wilderness here, a large 3.3 million acre wilderness. It's also part of one of the largest UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the world, combined with two other parks on the Canadian side and Wrangell St. Elias National Park a little further north. Also one of the largest protected marine ecosystems anywhere in the world. And it's a place where you have, of course, incredible scenery, the glaciers, but also this incredible web of life.
This place is always fresh and new. There's always an opportunity for something new to be discovered because it is such a wild place still.
This place, it's different every year because different people come in. There's a seasonal flow of people who live in the area, but more than that, just the wilderness. I've never been anywhere else in the world that you can achieve such wilderness here and feel alone.
One of the things about Glacier Bay is you recognize very quickly that you are in a true wilderness area. You go from forest to just sheer cliffs, and the water itself changes color, it changes viscosity, and you feel the temperature difference as you get further in.
The first time I saw Glacier Bay, I was almost shocked at its beauty. There's the glaciers, of course, but there's the landscape, there's the mountains that the glaciers have carved up. That's a thing of beauty. These beautiful U-shaped valleys that surround a pristine bay. And I've been around for 40 years. I was absolutely stunned, and I was hooked forever.
Glacier Bay has a long human history, and of course the native people, the Tlingit, have been here for thousands of years, and they'll say since time immemorial. And they were living in what is now Glacier Bay National Park very recently. The glacier came through a couple hundred years ago and literally forced the native people out of Glacier Bay, what is now Glacier Bay. You have a long native history here, and they're still all through Southeast Alaska. And then some of the early explorers here. Captain George Vancouver came through here. There were Spanish expeditions out on the outer coast, as well as French expeditions, British, a lot of human history that goes into this place. And then of course, more recently, people like John Muir, Eliza Skidmore, and then a lot of the tourists that have come through here, whether on steamship in the early days or on cruise ships, just like today, and even backcountry users here, like kayakers and hikers that come through the park. So it's got a long human history here, starting with the natives and continuing right up to today with us.
So the history of Glacier Bay begins long before any explorers came. The Huna Tlingit people used to live in this area. They say they lived in the shadow of a glacier. And when the glacier actually began to advance, they had to flee their homeland. It advanced so far, it came out into Icy Strait. And in about 1794, George Vancouver marked on the map where he saw that ice face. And where we are today, the glacier had actually receded up 65 miles. In only about over 200 years. So it's the fastest known retreat in the world of science anywhere in the world. So this is a really unique place to see glacial healing process of how everything comes back to life.
One of the interesting things about the ice in Alaska is because it was so thick, as recently as 25,000 years ago, it has pushed the crust down, actually depressed it. And as the ice melts away, it rises. In fact, the most rapid rising ground in the world is along the Lynn Canal as we go into Skagway. That area since 1794, when Vancouver came in, has risen 18 feet. And Glacier Bay is also rising. And so as the ice melts away in this area, you're actually getting not only land exposed by the ice, but land that's rising above the sea. And so there's really a net gain of land, and you can see the succession of plants starting with the bare rock that the ice has scraped away, all the way up to the magnificent Sitka spruce and western hemlock that grow throughout this area.
So the Grand Pacific Glacier is located really at the terminus of where most visitors go. It's at Upper Tar Inlet. It's the one that we put our nose right in and we see Canada at. Right next to it is the beautiful Marjorie Glacier, and that gets most of the attention. But the Grand Pacific Glacier, she deserves her due. She's the one that came out of the St. Elias Mountains and carved out this entire valley and was there just a couple of 250 years ago when Captain George Vancouver sailed through Icy Strait looking for the Northwest Passage, and he saw this shimmering wall of ice. That was the Grand Pacific Glacier. And the Grand Pacific Glacier is the one that retreated to Russell Island and the one that John Muir came up against and wouldn't let him get any farther.
The Grand Pacific Glacier is really the one that should be looked at, and most people ignore it because it's covered with sediment, big chunks of debris, And the reason for that is it's much longer and older, and as it melts away, the chunks of rock get left there and it looks like a big mud pile. Used to be connected to the much wider glacier, that's the Marjorie Glacier. As recently as 1992, they were joined together. As recently as George Vancouver sailing by in 1794, the ice came all the way out to the entrance of Glacier Bay, and now it's 65 miles farther back.
Marjorie Glacier is very unique in the sense that it's a healthy glacier. 95% of our glaciers in Alaska are unhealthy, so they're receding or they're melting, but the Marjorie Glacier is holding her own. She's one of the 5% of healthy glaciers. So we not only get to see her calve and break off that ice, but we get to be happy about that because she's able to reinitiate that ice when the snow keeps falling from the Fairweather Mountains, and that's her source. So she's definitely one of the highlights of Glacier Bay because not only is she an active glacier, moves about 6 feet forward through the mountains every day. We get to see enormous calving sometimes. You get to hear the calving. When that ice falls in the water, you get to see the gulls swoop in. There's a lot of energy, a lot of activity happening, even though it's something that's not even alive. And I just think it's a really spectacular thing.
So a glacier is a river of ice, and glaciers start up in the mountains. So snow falls up in the mountains, and then as it falls, provided it survives a year, and more snow can fall, and that survives a year until eventually it compacts itself, and you just compress, and then it's so heavy that gravity itself pulls the ice down to the lowest point. So glaciers flow because of gravity. They're being pulled by gravity downhill. Calving is the birth of an iceberg. It's where you have a tidewater glacier breaking because either there's a ledge and it just weighs too much and it falls off, or it's just the salt water eroding it itself, and then large chunks will fall in. If you're very quiet, you can hear the glacier talking to you. It's groaning, it's creaking, and before calving events, they tend to make a lot more groans and creaks. And then when you calve, you hear this crack, and then you see with water just coming up and everywhere as you have a multi-ton ice cube dropping into the ocean.
Lamplugh Glacier, that's our blue glacier. We call it Lamplugh the Blue. It's about 3/4 of a mile wide. It's a couple hundred feet high, a little less, a little bit. You know, it has been a declining glacier, retreating glacier, but its source goes up into the Brady ice field, about 12 miles away or so. We had a glacier doctor come out and look at her a couple of years ago, and he checked her out, and he thought that she was doing pretty well, kind of holding her own. So, you know, a glacier does well if it receives more snow at its source than it melts at its face. And so Lamplugh the Blue seems to be holding its own pretty well.
So although Glacier Bay is this sanctuary for wildlife and it's this spiritual ancestral homeland, the tidewater glaciers are something that people associate with this place, and what really makes it stand out, because there are very few places on the planet where you can see tidewater glaciers. And many of us around the world have heard about glaciers growing up, and yet here is a place on the planet where we can actually see that still in action. And so what I hear from visitors when they are here are these comments of enlightenment for actually seeing how the earth itself is formed. Because here, where you actually see the ice carving down the mountain, where you can see the silt in the water, you begin to finally understand what this all means and how it's put together.
To me, Glacier Bay is wildness. It comes down here to a wide open area, wildness, wilderness, and a large area where, again, you have all the parts in place here. And you have a place with, of course, the scenery, the glaciers, and all the mountains as well. So to me, the biggest thing on Glacier Bay is wildness.
I'm very passionate about this place because it still exists. And a lot of places in the lower 48 don't have such expansive wilderness. We're part of a contiguous unity of 3 other parks in the US and Canada, and it's the second biggest wild protected area in the world and second only to Antarctica. So to come to a place where you can really feel alone and really try to connect with the environment and with nature, it's a really unique opportunity here.
I would actually say, to me, Alaska is home, because I think of wilderness and nature as home and where my heart is. So every time I'm in Alaska now, I'm just so happy to be back, where I am just a small, tiny piece of a ginormous, beautiful ecosystem.